What connects Mexico, Arizona, and the Gulf of California? Yeah, they're close to each other, but that's not what we're talking about right now. Since 2022, Mexico's been working on its own mega project, where dredging ships have been working around the clock to haul up millions of cubic feet of silt and sand from the bottom of the Gulf of California. The goal was to increase the depth in certain spots to 49 feet. Hundreds of construction machines handled tasks of all kinds, from building new infrastructure to upgrading old stuff. They also laid down miles of new railroad tracks. What does Arizona have to do with it? Well, together with Mexico, it's going to get huge benefits from this project in the Gulf of California. So what's actually happening there? Let's break it down. Goods from Arizona usually go in and out through California's neighboring ports, the Port of Los Angeles and the Port of Long Beach. They're not that far compared to other ports, and you don't have to cross into other countries. Perfect. Except, as it turns out, only in theory. Ports in Southern California are among the busiest in the U.S. For example, the Port of Los Angeles is often called America's Port because it's the biggest container port in all of North America. Just to give you an idea, in 2024 it handled 10.3 million TEUs, or 20-foot containers. Long Beach, as a self-respecting neighbor, doesn't fall behind. In 2022 it handled 9.13 million TEUs. At the same time, no possible upgrades can keep up with the growth in maritime shipping, so the two neighboring ports are nothing but trouble for Arizona. It all began with the COVID-19 pandemic when consumer demand surged, a workforce shortage emerged, logistics broke down, and aging infrastructure buckled under the pressure. For example, in 2021, a ship at the Port of Los Angeles could wait around 8 days for a berth, and sometimes people and companies waiting for cargo had to delay receiving their goods for up to 12 days. These issues had emerged before, but it was around that time they became a constant problem. September 2023 set a record for the container crisis. Due to a surge in cargo volumes, the average dwell time for containers before rail transport in Southern California went through the roof. For instance, while in September 2022 the delay was 6.5 days, in 2023 it jumped to over 9 days. You can ship goods by truck. Yeah, it's less efficient, but as an alternative, so why not? The thing is, there are problems with that too. On the I-10 and I-40 highways between Southern California and Arizona, trucks keep running into roadwork and traffic jams. Instead of a quick trip, they often lose an extra 1 to 2 days. Time, as you probably know, is money, so all this was clearly a headache for shippers and receivers in Arizona. Meanwhile, all these issues have definitely affected other companies that, for certain reasons like lower labor costs, moved their production from the U.S. to northern Mexico, to Sonora. Take Ford, for example. The company has been in Sonora for a long time. Its Hermosillo plant celebrated the production of its 7 millionth vehicle in 2024. At the same time, everything has been set up nearby to ensure flexible production. This is the so-called suppliers next door strategy. A park of 14 buildings sits right on the plant's grounds, housing key parts suppliers. So they managed to save on salaries and avoid the Port of Los Angeles and other congested areas, but they still ran into a problem. Again, a logistical one, which the governor of Sonora perfectly described as, "It's a logistical tragedy." And you know, it's hard to disagree. To ship a car to another country, Ford has to put it on a train and wait for it to travel 1,200 miles overland from Hermosillo to the port of Lázaro Cárdenas in Michoacán. Can you imagine how much the company lost just because there's no port nearby? And how much other companies and people in Arizona lose because of the problems with Southern California's ports? Now here's a fun fact. There's always been a port right under their nose that could have saved them from all these issues. Guaymas. This port is located in Mexico on the coast of the Gulf of California in Sonora. Why wasn't it used? Well, actually it was used, but clearly not as much as they would have liked. And the reason is that it just didn't match modern trade realities or the specific needs of companies like Ford. The biggest obstacle was the depth of the port waters. Guaymas could only handle ships with a displacement of 36,000 to 40,000 tons. Nowadays, post-Panamax vessels are being used increasingly more often, with their displacement typically ranging from 100 to 150 or even 160,000 tons, depending on the source. So Guaymas is completely unsuitable for these container ships. But what about other types of ships, for example, Panamax? They couldn't enter the port either because their displacement is between 60 and 80,000 tons. This means the port couldn't handle the vast majority of large modern vessels, which are the backbone of today's maritime trade. Such a restriction strictly limited the types and volumes of cargo that could pass through the port, making it economically unviable for large-scale, high-efficiency shipping. Plus, the port's infrastructure was outdated and basic. It lacked the necessary specialized facilities to handle diverse and complex modern cargo. The port wasn't set up to handle goods that need special platforms, fast loading, unloading gear, or specialized storage. Historically, it's mainly dealt with less demanding bulk cargo like minerals, copper concentrate, and grain. This lack of development made the port functionally limited and unable to fit into the complex logistical chains that have become the standard in modern trade. But that was all in the past. Luckily for many who were eager to finally fix the logistics situation, the port began a major upgrade worth 3.5 billion pesos, or roughly $192.5 million. The modernization started in 2022 with the most crucial part, dredging. There's no specific info on what equipment was used or how much work was done in the current project. However, we do have data on which vessels handled the dredging back in 2009 after Hurricane Jimena. This should give an idea of how technically prepared Mexico is to invest in the Guaymas port upgrades. Back then, 3 ships showed up in the port area, pulling a combined 26 million cubic feet of loose debris from the bottom. And even then, the workload back then was way lighter compared to what we had to deal with during the modernization. In 2022, dredging work was carried out with one single goal: to make the port capable of handling vessels with a displacement of up to 100,000 tons, and that meant massive amounts of material dug up from the bottom. Obviously, this required much more powerful equipment, and in greater numbers too. Different spots needed different amounts of sand and silt removed from the bottom. In some places, the depth had to be over 36 feet, and others 49 feet. The next step was to boost port security. It's worth mentioning that the modernization project was carried out through collaboration between the Sonora government, the Guaymas National Port System Administration, or ASAPONA, and the Navy Secretariat. All protection measures were judged by naval standards of reliability. The seaport gained immunity against extreme weather and storms with breakwaters, sturdy piers, and clear navigational signs. This military-grade quality cut repair costs. Less damage, fewer fixes, and more appeal for those who avoided the derelict Mexican site over fears for their ship's well-being. Another key decision was major investments in tech upgrades and beefing up security. The port is rolling out a state-of-the-art video surveillance system. This system includes installing 360-degree wide-angle cameras that provide detailed and precise monitoring of the entire area. And how can you do without self-learning tech in 2025? Now in the port, all video surveillance via cameras will process data independently and automatically detect suspicious activity. Besides, they're rolling out systems to restrict access to secure areas, which altogether really boosts port security, helping prevent theft and illegal trade. And yeah, most of this will work wirelessly, meaning criminal activity will be stopped even if, say, there's sabotage or bad weather that could wreck the infrastructure. Remember how one of the main issues was that the Port of Guaymas was originally built mostly for just a couple of types of cargo, so anyone shipping anything different would steer clear of it? Well, Mexico's fixed that too. A new refrigerated warehouse for seafood and strategic cargo has been set up, equipped with climate control systems. This has expanded the range of services like transporting perishable goods. After the modernization, the port facility can now store them for a while before shipping them to their destination. Plus, there's a major effort to expand and upgrade the port's onshore infrastructure. This includes putting up new quays and fully revamping the old ones. In particular, the multi-use dock has been modernized. It was built with versatile ramps and crane rails to accommodate various ships, log carriers, bulk grain ships, and container vessels. The 4-foot concrete slab and steel reinforcement provide toughness and longevity, and the pier heating system keeps things running smoothly even in the mild cold of winter. They also repurposed and adapted existing facilities. For example, they converted a cruise ship pier to handle general cargo, roll-on, roll-off shipments, and vehicles. Yes, as you can guess, Mexico couldn't just ignore Ford's desire to ship cars on container vessels via some shorter route. So as part of the project, they built massive parking platforms specifically designed for efficient storage and handling of large numbers of cars, whether they're ready for shipment or just arriving. It's also worth noting that the Port of Guaymas had another major issue: the lack of proper railway infrastructure, both inside the port area and on the connecting routes. But a major overhaul exists to fix such flaws, and thanks to the hard work of engineers and builders, the infrastructure got a solid upgrade. New railway tracks were also laid, significantly boosting the port's multimodal capabilities and ensuring smooth, efficient connections between sea shipments and extensive land transport networks. And as noted, logistics will be greatly improved thanks to the advanced digital processes implemented during modernization. After all these upgrades, Mexican eco-activists are seriously on edge. Picture this. Thousands of tons of material hauled up from the ocean floor, large-scale construction happening, and so close to the water, which, is basically a giant alarm bell for environmentalists. How do the people executing the project respond to this? The project documents state Guaymas is being upgraded with an emphasis on eco-friendliness. On top of that, it's pushing for green port certification, adopting tech and methods that support clean energy and reduce harm to the environment. Ecologists probably won't be too reassured by this, but still it's better when large-scale construction projects try to minimize their impact on the environment. The major part of the port modernization was finished in 2024, but the day when everyone can finally relax and say it's over hasn't come yet because there's more work being done. But do they really have to wait until the project is finished to see any benefits? Maybe not, but that's definitely not how this company sees it, the one that's already lost a ton of money due to inefficient logistics. Yep, it's Ford, and in that same year, 2024, they started using a new route. The first batch of Bronco trucks and pickups rolled off the assembly line, headed to the port, and then sailed off to Chile without any delays. The cargo reached Guaymas in record time, no more 1,200 miles like before, just over 62 miles by rail, and the vehicles were already sailing to take South America by storm. And to top it all off, the governor of Sonora said that once the project is complete, the new route will cut the carmaker's costs by a whopping 30%. Sounds like a dream scenario for Ford, but keep in mind the savings won't just come from cutting down the car delivery distance, they'll also get cheaper equipment since the port will be used for that too. And of course, this will allow the company to ship vehicles in larger batches. And don't forget, once construction is fully completed, the port will be able to handle vessels with a displacement of up to 100,000 tons. Plus, after the port's full upgrade, tons of companies will want to set up near the Ford factory since manufacturing will be cheaper thanks to lower wages and logistics headaches will be gone. What about Arizona? The state will get a major benefit from completing the modernization. The Port of Guaymas will become a fresh alternative, letting businesses rely less on overcrowded ports and the routes leading to them. Plus, while many companies couldn't ship or receive goods through Guaymas before due to a lack of proper port infrastructure, after the upgrade, almost any business will be able to use it, whether it's food, mining, or automotive like Ford, as we've seen. And yeah, of course, everyone will also be interested in the fact that the port will be able to handle big container ships. That's the kind of efficiency every company's probably looking for. Also, we can't forget that Guaymas could help strengthen trade ties between Arizona and the U.S. and Mexico's Sonora state. Actually, Arizona's been shipping copper concentrate through the Nogales checkpoint to the port of Guaymas for a long time now, after which the resource gets transported to China. Back in 2002, Arizona made just $4.2 million from this, but by 2019, there was a surge. And not just growth, a mind-blowing one, a whopping 38,000%. The state managed to ramp up its shipments, and as a result, its revenue jumped to $1.6 billion. As for the port of Guaymas, it was primarily focused on exporting copper concentrate. Some data shows that in 2017, 75% of all cargo passing through the port was exactly this resource. And really, things were going fine for everyone. But now they need to ramp up shipments, China's hungry for more resources, and Arizona wants to make more money. That's why port modernization is key. All the new upgrades and retrofits are designed to help companies cut costs and boost profits. And don't forget about Mexico and especially Sonora. The Guaymas port is a game changer for them. For example, completing the modernization will allow Mexico to handle global trade routes more efficiently, especially those connecting it to the Asia-Pacific region. Plus, it helps diversify Mexico's maritime trade routes, reducing reliance on other ports that are sometimes overcrowded or less efficient, which strengthens the country's overall logistics reliability. The port also acts as a major catalyst for Sonora's economic growth and attracts foreign direct investment. Guaymas is a key part of the Sonora Sustainable Energy Plan, a comprehensive initiative aimed at boosting the region's economy through renewable energy development, like Latin America's largest solar plant in Puerto Peñasco. Improved port infrastructure makes Sonora way more attractive for foreign direct investment, especially with the growing trend of nearshoring when companies move production closer to big markets like the U.S. The Guaymas upgrade is expected to draw investments into high-potential sectors, including electric vehicles, semiconductor manufacturing, and the development of the lithium industry in the region. The third key aspect is boosting multimodal transport links. Investments in modernization aren't just about the port itself, they also include major upgrades to rail and road infrastructure connecting Guaymas to inland Mexico and the U.S. For example, there's talk of upgrading the Guaymas-Chihuahua Highway, which will create more efficient and direct routes for land transportation. This deeper integration into the broader national transport network boosts overall logistics efficiency across the country and strengthens Mexico's position in the Canamex corridor. It's a route that connects Canada, the U.S., and Mexico, offering huge opportunities to build and expand trade ties. Finally, positioning Guaymas as a green port seriously boosts Mexico's eco-friendly image globally. It doesn't just show the country's commitment to sustainable development, it also makes it way more appealing to international partners and investors focused on clean tech. All in all, even though the costs aren't that high compared to projects in other countries, upgrading Guaymas port is something that can literally help everyone around. The Mexican Yucatan Peninsula is full of impressive geological landmarks. Just think of the Chicxulub crater, where scientists believe an asteroid about 6 miles wide slammed into Earth some 66.5 million years ago. The peninsula's nature is just as breathtaking. It's home to a huge number of endemic animals and plants, meaning species you won't find anywhere else on the planet. But if we're talking about major infrastructure projects that are definitely needed to help this place grow, the peninsula hasn't seen any of those in a really long time. But just recently, things took a turn. The Mexican government started developing a hugely strategic peninsula, which led to a plan to dredge around 353 million cubic feet of soil from the bottom of the Gulf of America. Cutting-edge machinery is already at work around the clock, and the project is set to receive between $350 and $500 million in funding. So what's going on there? Trade between the U.S. and Mexico in 2024 hit an all-time high. Total two-way trade reached a record $840 billion, making Mexico the U.S.'s largest trading partner for the second year in a row. At the same time, Mexico exports to the U.S. rose by 6% from 2023 to $506 billion, while U.S. exports to Mexico grew by 3% to $334 billion. The top categories of Mexican exports to the U.S. are cars and car parts, electronic devices, agricultural goods, and petroleum products. In return, the U.S. supplies motor vehicles and their parts, electrical equipment, chemicals, and oil drilling equipment. At the same time, a big share of trade is carried out using water transport, container ships. What's more, right now countries are trying to use one of the most efficient options available, post-Panamax vessels. Typical container ships of this class can be over 964 feet, and their width exceeds 106 feet. As for capacity, they can carry from 5,000 to more than 14,500 TEU or 20-foot containers, and some of the largest ones can move over 24,000 TEU. And everything would be fine, but many Mexican ports can't handle ships like that. Massive post-Panamax container vessels need a depth of more than 39 feet depending on their draft. According to the U.S. International Trade Administration, Mexico has 102 ports along 7,146 miles of coastline, but only 6 of them are modern and capable of handling the largest post-Panamax vessels. And one area feels it the most: the Yucatan Peninsula. It's really important for trade with the U.S. because from there you could send post-Panamax ships to Florida's ports and back, and there's even the port of Progresso, which is perfect thanks to its location. One of the most remarkable features of Progresso is its unique pier, which is considered the longest in the world, stretching about 4 miles deep into the bay. This unusual length is due to the very shallow seafloor near the coast, which requires going far out from the shore to reach depths deep enough for ships. The pier, built in the late 1930s and then actively extended in the 1980s, is a true engineering marvel that provides access to deep water areas. Today, Progresso is the key link in international trade, connecting the Yucatan Peninsula with the U.S., especially Florida, Europe, and the Caribbean countries. It serves as the main container terminal in the region, crucial for local textile and assembly industries that export goods to various markets. The The port's also equipped with specialized terminals for handling bulk and loose cargo, including grains in this area. It ranks in the top 5 by throughput capacity across all of Mexico. On top of that, petroleum products sold by the state company Pemex pass through Progresso. Internal transport links with the city of Mérida and the rest of Mexico allow for efficient distribution of cargo overland, making Progresso an indispensable part of regional and national logistics. Besides, Progresso's a popular spot for cruise ships and ferries, drawing thousands of tourists every year who want to explore the cultural and natural sights of the Yucatan. Sounds great, but with one big catch. With the current fairway depth at 40 feet, Progresso can handle ships with a draft over 32 feet. And when you add the shipping channel width of 492 feet, it turns out that big container ships can't really maneuver properly. This limits the entry of post-Panamax ships into the port and forces cargo owners to reroute container ships from Florida to Veracruz, then transfer them onto barges, smaller river vessels, or even send them overland. As a result, logistics get stretched by 12 to 18 hours and costs go up. Of course, we weren't the only ones to notice. Mexico definitely knows that trade with the U.S. would be way more efficient if they could handle big container ships from Florida right at Yucatan. Actually, that's exactly what the Mexicans got busy with in 2024, upgrading the port of Progresso with costs estimated from $350 to $540 million. To carry out the modernization, Mexico planned to do the most important thing, to carry out dredging works. For this, in April 2025, the Yucatan authorities announced a tender which included one very important statement showing the scale of the work. About 353 million cubic feet of soil must be removed from the port area. To get this job done, a contractor has already been hired. Mexicana de Dragados, a branch of the well-known Belgian Jan Del Nul group, well-known in dredging and port circles. According to the contract, the dredging work kicked off on June 19, 2025, when specialized vessels started gathering on site. Trailing suction hopper dredgers like the TSHD type, these are actively used by Jan Del Nul. A vessel of this type is self-propelled and can move across the water area, dragging along 1 or 2 suction pipes on a seabed. At the end of these pipes are special nozzles that collect loose sediment materials like sand, silt, or fine gravel. Powerful pumps suck up the mix of water and soil, which is then sent into the ship's huge hold called the hopper. After it's filled, the dredger moves to the unloading spot where the collected material can be dumped through bottom hatches or pumped ashore via pipeline to create new land. These dredgers are perfect for working over large areas with soft soils and out to sea without causing much disruption to other marine traffic. Another type of dredging vessel that got to work is the cutter suction dredger. If the previous machine was kind of like a vacuum cleaner, then here we have, let's say, an underwater excavator. A cutter suction dredger usually stays still while working, anchoring itself to the bottom with special support piles. At the end of its suction pipe, there's a rotating cutting tool, the cutter head. This cutter is meant to break up and loosen tougher soils, including compacted sand, dense clay, and even soft rock that other dredgers can't handle effectively. This loosened material is then sucked up by pumps and constantly pumped through a floating pipeline directly to the shore or onto barges for further transport. Cutter suction dredgers are known for their high precision and ability to create channels and basins with specified depth and shape. The plan is for dredging to go on for a year. Exactly during this period, the main targets will be met, the depth will be raised from 40 to 44 feet, and the navigation channel will be expanded from 492 to 590 feet. Where will all the material dredged from the bottom go? You can't be sure it won't just be dumped somewhere for no reason. The silt and everything else are already being used to achieve another important goal of the project. The soil taken out during dredging is used to create 2 artificial platforms, each covering 99 acres. Once all the embankment work is done, warehouse storage will be constructed on the platforms, along with bulk cargo handling areas and a spot for setting up heavy-duty cranes, plus quay walls and access paths for moving equipment up and down and for vehicles to get in. In general, the plan is to do everything needed to set up specialized terminals for containers, grain, petrochemicals, bulk mineral cargo, cars, liquefied oil and natural gas, as well as for a ship repair center. According to the Construction Industry Association, CMIC, as part of the preparations for the expansion, a road covering more than 53,800 square feet has also been laid out to connect the port's existing long viaduct with the northeast edge of one of the platforms in order to ease traffic inside this area and speed up the shipment of large cargo batches. Naturally, the waves will be a problem for everything that's been built, but they haven't been overlooked. The plan includes building an eastern breakwater that'll calm the sea's rage enough so that the waves won't harm the new facilities or even disrupt the work of the modernized port. It's expected that the first containers will be able to pass through the new terminals by the end of 2026. That is, the work's moving so fast that they plan to finish everything in less than 2 years. The modernization of the Port of Progresso will open up a whole range of new opportunities for the Yucatan region and for all of Mexico. First of all, increasing the depth and width of the access channel will make it possible to receive large modern post-Panamax container ships with a draft of up to 39 feet, which will sharply reduce the need to reroute cargo, for example, from Florida to neighboring ports and transfer it onto barges. This, in turn, will cut delivery times and lower logistics costs. For local producers and exporters, this means more predictable delivery times and better rates, which in turn boost their competitiveness on the global market. However, it's worth saying right away that even after the upgrade, Progresso won't be a port capable of handling absolutely all of the largest container ships. There will still be some limitations, but the situation will be much better than it was before. The expansion of port infrastructure and the addition of new container, grain, petrochemical, and other terminals will make it possible to handle more cargo at once and broaden the port's specialization. For example, set up a separate terminal for liquefied gas or vehicles, which previously required investments in other regions. New warehouses and transshipment zones will allow goods to be unloaded and stored right at the quay, cutting port internal transport to a minimum and speeding up the entire operation. Besides, linking the port with highways will boost domestic logistics. Cargo will reach Merida, Cancun, and other key spots in Yucatan faster and at a lower cost, and will also move further on in transit to the country's central states. This will open access to new markets and attract investments into the region's industry and agriculture. And let's not forget that everything built needs to be maintained. The logical outcome, thanks to the modernization, thousands of new jobs will show up in and around the port, from crane operators and logistics pros to tech maintenance teams and environmental monitoring specialists. Taking all these factors into account, the modernization of Progresso will become a powerful driver of economic growth. The port's trade turnover could double within 5 years after the work is completed, and the extra tax revenues will allow the government to invest more in social and infrastructure projects. Boosting capacity will help Mexico solidify its role as a key trading partner of the U.S., especially Florida, and build strategic corridors for deliveries to countries in Central and South America. Over time, the port will become more than just a cargo handling spot. It'll turn into a modern logistics hub that can ensure steady growth and well-being for the entire region. And here it should be said that the port modernization, including dredging works, is always a big threat to many organisms living in local waters. That's why people ask, will anything be done within the project to minimize these risks? Of course. All the improvement work at Progresso comes with a mandatory environmental impact manifest, which includes a full set of measures to prevent and ease the effects of dredging. The document provides for the use of sediment screens and barriers to hold back suspended particles so as to prevent clouding of coastal waters and the death of plankton and mollusks. Regular monitoring of solid particles and the water's oxygen levels will also be carried out, and strict limits on working times will be set in fish spawning and sea turtle breeding areas. Moreover, the project is supported by programs for compensatory planting of mangrove thickets and restoring coastal ecosystems in areas where the seabed is being developed, which helps preserve the local water's biodiversity and minimize shoreline erosion. Local environmentalists and community groups have repeatedly pointed out to the authorities the need for more detailed technical and environmental studies before and after the work. Some news reports note that despite assurances of minimal impact, there should be an additional assessment of the cost to the coastal fishermen's feeding grounds, possible shifts in bottom-dwelling communities, and effects on coastal algae. In response to this, the project includes mandatory independent environmental audits and the establishment of an eco-lab at the local university, where water and soil samples will be regularly tested, reports published, and if needed, adjustments made to the dredging technology. Together, these measures aim to strike a balance between the project's economic benefits and preserving the fragile ecosystems of the Gulf of America. One more key decision of the modernization project is that they plan to link the port with Tren Maya, one of the most ambitious infrastructure projects in Mexico, and this link will offer a huge number of advantages. This is a 965-mile railway project aimed at connecting 5 Mexican states, Chiapas, Tabasco, Campeche, Yucatan, and Quintana Roo, into a single passenger and freight network. The idea of creating the train of the future was announced in 2018 by President Andrés Manuel López Obrador and quickly gained support at both the federal and regional levels. Construction kicked off in June 2020, and the first stretch of the route between San Francisco Calquini and Cancun officially opened on December 15, 2023. Over the year, new segments rolled out, and by December 15, 2024, the main loop was complete, covering all the key spots from Palenque to Chetumal. The Tren Maya route includes 34 stations, 20 of which are large and 14 small. It has 3 main routes, Golfo, Selva, and Caribe, plus 2 branches that will eventually form a full network with branch lengths of up to 994 miles. Trains run daily, with passenger services running every 4 to 6 hours. The project's rolling stock consists of 42 modern diesel-electric trains built by Alstom. Each train can carry up to 430 passengers and is equipped with air conditioning, information displays, and areas for passengers with reduced mobility. The project's designed to carry up to 25 million passengers a year. On some sections like Mérida, Cancun, Chetumal, 2 tracks have been laid to increase service frequency, and in the Palenque, Mérida, Cancun area, there's even a 3rd track for overtaking and sorting trains. The stats from the first year showed an average daily ridership of around 2,000 people per train, and the total number of passengers carried topped 705,000. Yes, that's still a long way from the maximum of 25 million passengers, but the line hasn't been fully completed yet. Once it's up and running, the number of people traveling with Tren Maya could increase significantly. During the construction of the Tren Maya project, special attention's being paid to sustainable development and minimizing environmental damage. Before the work began, Mexico's Ministry of the Environment carried out an inventory of flora and fauna along the route, relocating rare species to nature reserves. Of course, there were some problems here too, but with a relatively positive outcome. For example, on the most sensitive 68-mile stretch, more than 2.2 million trees had to be relocated, which sparked protests from environmentalists and indigenous communities. In response, the route was adjusted several times, and mandatory water quality monitoring and ground sonar checks were introduced when earth-moving equipment was operating. In other words, the Tren Maya contractors and designers are showing flexibility and are ready to address conflicts. All in all, that's a serious project with a serious approach. However, right now, we're especially interested in the link between Tren Maya and the modernization of the Progresso port, and that link really does exist. Since mid-2024, a cargo division has been added to the project. And on top of that, engineers have started rebuilding and laying about 43 miles of track from Mérida to the port of Progresso, so that by the end of 2026, they can launch the first phase of freight operations. The cargo network will include 4 main multimodal terminals in Palenque, Poxila, Progresso, and Cancun, where containers and bulk cargo can be transferred directly from ships to trains and back. For cargo operations in Progresso, there are plans to build a modern multimodal hub with rail lines reaching directly to the piers of the new terminals. After the dredging work's done and the fairway is widened, post-Panamax ships will be able to unload their cargo straight onto rail cars without using barges, which will cut both time and shipping costs by a lot. It's estimated that the ship-to-train system will reduce logistics expenses by 15 to 20% and nearly halve delivery times to the central states of Mexico and the U.S. In general, the modernization of Progresso isn't some last-minute project that wasn't thought through. It fully matches the direction Mexico's currently taking on the Yucatan Peninsula, a well-rounded development that benefits pretty much everyone. The Gulf of California isn't exactly a hotspot of activity. It doesn't make headlines, and major infrastructure projects tend to pass it by, especially compared to the nearby Gulf of America. Over there, things happen often enough to get the attention of surrounding nations and sometimes the whole planet. However, when it comes to infrastructural activity, the Gulf of California is starting to catch up, as the Mexicans have come up with a project in which the Gulf's seabed will be broken up, then lifted and transported elsewhere using specialized equipment. To give you an idea of the scale, the Gulf will lose more than 35 million cubic feet of what has made up its seabed for thousands of years. What's this all about? Mexico set its sights on reaching Texas. Yes, the very state that has no direct link whatsoever to the Gulf of California, and in the end, this could benefit Mexico, Texas, the U.S. as a whole, and even far-off Canada, not to mention even more remote Asian nations. As of 2024, Texas had strong trade ties with Asian countries. Shipments of oil, gas, chemicals, and electronic equipment from the state to nations across the Pacific brought in $122.4 billion. In the other direction, electronics and industrial goods come into Texas from Asian countries, yes, in much smaller volumes, but it's definitely not fair to say that trade with countries on the other side of the Pacific is insignificant for the state. How do goods get to the state's main cities from Asia and back? The first option is through the Panama Canal. The second is from the state to the ports of Los Angeles and then across the Pacific to the destination, or in the reverse direction. On the map, it all looks simple and reliable, but in reality, there are problems. The Panama Canal is one of those routes that can easily get shut down by a drought because in that case, there's just not enough water in the canal to keep its usual traffic capacity. That's exactly what happened in 2023 when lower water levels meant only 32 ships a day could pass through instead of the usual 36. As a result, more than 200 ships piled up at the entrances, and the average wait time stretched to 21 days. Yes, this has only happened once, but there's a reason the Panama Canal is called the bottleneck of global trade. Even one not-so-major incident can disrupt traffic through the canal and cause serious delays. The ports of Los Angeles and Long Beach have their downsides too. For example, the Port of Los Angeles is called America's Port for a reason. In 2024, its total cargo turnover reached 10.3 million TEUs, or 20-foot containers. It's the busiest port in the U.S. And what about Long Beach? Well, it's right next door, and not just geographically, but also in the rankings of the nation's busiest ports. In that same 2024, Long Beach handled 9.6 million TEUs, making it the second largest seaport in the U.S. by cargo volume. This already shows that delays and other logistics issues for California's main ports and for the country are just part of the norm. Any accident or glitch means massive bottlenecks for loading and unloading. All in all, either way, it causes delays. Maybe not all the time, but they're there, and sometimes they snowball into a full-blown transport meltdown. And in trade, delays mean extra costs. So it wouldn't hurt to have another route. And here it is, Port of Mazatlan on Mexico's Pacific coast. On the map, it's positioned so that cargo from Asia can arrive there directly, bypassing both the Panama Canal and the chaos of the U.S. West Coast. And from there, it's a straight shot north and through Texas. What's more, in high-profile circles, there's talk about using Mazatlan as part of a big transcontinental route. The Mazatlan-Winnipeg corridor concept has been discussed in public materials and industry platforms running through Texas, where Mazatlan would be the Pacific entry in the Mexico-USA-Canada chain. These plans are mostly conceptual, but they clearly cast Mazatlan as a potential entry door for cargo that might go north via Texas. Despite all this, the port has a problem. It simply doesn't meet the modern demands of efficient sea freight. However, planners of new routes linking Mazatlan and Texas have a reason to be happy. Right now, the port is on the verge of a major upgrade that'll take it to the next level. The first, and one of the main things planned as part of the modernization, is to deepen the shipping channel, the route that watercraft take to reach the docking area. Currently, without any upgrades, its depth varies between 34 and 38 feet in different sections, which prevents the most efficient container ships and other vessels that can carry the largest loads from arriving in Mazatlan. As part of the Mazatlan redevelopment project, they plan to deepen it to 50 feet. The project documents already laid out that to reach the final goal, they'd have to lift a massive 46 million cubic feet of soil from the bottom. If that's not enough to get how hard the task is, the same documents clarify a big chunk of the material pulled up will be hard, rocky stuff. At this point, you can also immediately conclude the dredging work will need specialized equipment, not just pumping out silt, but literally breaking up the seabed. For example, a team of several cutter suction dredgers is expected to head to the site, equipment that's perfect for this kind of job. They're fitted with a powerful rotating cutter or rotary loosener that mechanically breaks up hard soil and rock into small pieces. After that, the crushed material, mixed with water, is sucked up by strong pumps and pumped through a pipeline either to the shore or to a special vessel designed to carry everything that's been broken up and lifted from the bottom. Dredging is definitely useful, but what's been deepened can easily get filled back in with sand and silt brought in by the currents. To prevent this, protective structures are used. Particularly breakwaters, they're purposely built right in the water, creating a barrier that blocks sediment from drifting into the port area. Besides that, breakwaters didn't get their name for nothing. They literally break the waves. Without any protection, the port's shoreline suffers damage. When there's a breakwater, the incoming water spreads out, causing the waves to lose their power. Mazatlan has 2 breakwaters, which you'd think would provide great protection from both the tide and the waves. However, like any structure, these barriers have a lifespan, and right now it's coming to an end. That's why, as part of the modernization, a full renovation is planned. According to the plan, the Mexicans are set to dismantle the bad sections and lay down a massive framework of cobblestones and large rocks again, and then place an outer protective layer made of heavy concrete modules. The documents even specifically mention that time-tested, wave-breaking core lock blocks will be used. The scale of the work is huge. Each of the breakwaters is over 1,377 feet long, so more than 82,000 tons of material will be required for the reconstruction. And the cost of carrying out all the work on the breakwaters is currently estimated at over 60 million pesos. There are some changes that have already been done and are right now bringing benefits to the port. For instance, during the 2023 Mazatlan modernization, the crew worked hard for several hours setting up a new heavy mobile crane in the port. Maybe it doesn't seem that significant on the scale of the whole port, but in reality, it's a big advantage. So the lifting capacity of this crane reaches 200 tons, which makes it possible to handle really big loads. Plus, it all happens fast, since the lifting speed is 459 feet per minute. On top of that, the machine's reach goes up to 210 feet. All this helped Mazatlan set up its game in cargo handling. Also, as part of the upgrade, investments have already been approved for 17 tractors, 13 platforms, and a bunch of other equipment needed for smoother and quicker cargo processing. And of course, when it comes to container ships and other vessels carrying different cargo, the modernization plan involves repairing and upgrading the port's infrastructure as a whole. To get a sense of the scale, the changes will cover more than 161,000 square feet of the port area in total. Alongside upgrading equipment at the port, digital solutions are being introduced. This is the Paperless Port Initiative. Under this program, key processes at the port are being digitized. Electronic registration and access control for vehicles and personnel, switching to electronic manifests and documents, integrating payment and accounting systems, and building a unified platform to share operational information between the terminal operator, customs, and logistics partners. At the transition stage, pilot modules are being launched, a digital access control system at the gates, electronic unloading queues, and a module for accepting electronic payments and invoices. Besides that, training for staff and configuring IT system interactions are underway to transfer data between port departments and external participants in the logistics chain. As of 2025, the modernization is actively underway, and it's likely that in a few years they'll announce the port is fully upgraded and ready to spark a trading revolution. Yeah, it sounds a bit over the top, but even the work that's already done is starting to bring real results. For example, new equipment, system upgrades, added capacity, and infrastructure development led to the total cargo throughout at Mazatlan Port increasing by over 20% in 2024. One of the most notable changes was that more than 160,000 cars passed through the port that year. Another significant achievement was the growth in steel handling. In 2024, compared to the previous year, the figure nearly doubled, reaching 580,000 tons. Meanwhile, cargo turnover through Mazatlan kept growing into 2025. In the first half of the year, the volume of goods passing through the Mexican port rose by 15% compared to the same period in 2024. In August 2025, Mazatlan's main cargo terminal carried out one of its toughest and largest shipments, which required over 59,000 square feet of specially prepared space for maneuvering and storage. More than 1,190 tons of wind tower components were unloaded from the ML Fregata, including parts weighing over 36 tons each. The operation required strict step-by-step coordination. Unloading was done using a mix of mobile dockside cranes as well as specialized booms, grabs, and loaders adapted for unusual cargo. All this shows that the port can increase its cargo turnover and handle complex shipments. However, only once the dredging is finished will Mazatlan truly become a key point on the route between Asia and Texas. Increasing the depth to 50 feet will open doors for a whole new range of more efficient vessels that are common in global trade today. First and foremost, this will affect new Panamax-class container ships capable of carrying over 14,000 TEU with a draft of up to 49 feet. Besides container ships, the port will be able to accommodate large Cape-sized bulk carriers, often used to transport coal, iron ore, and grain. These ships have a draft of up to 56 feet. But when partially loaded, they can safely dock in Mazatlan, opening up new opportunities for bulk cargo export and import. As a result, Texas will get the chance to send and receive all kinds of cargo from Asia, not just through the packed ports of Los Angeles and the Panama Canal, but via a less clogged route. Consequently, you can imagine that this will cut down delays that cost both Texas companies and Asian market representatives money. Actually, there's no need to cut down freight through busy hubs. They can just set up an additional route through Mazatlan and move more goods alongside the existing routes. Actually, this looks like a pretty promising direction, because despite the current instability in global trade, it's clear Texas will be ramping up trade with the Asian region. Of course, nobody's thinking that the modernization is done exclusively for Texas and that all the benefits will go to that state. Mexico itself, of course, will benefit the most. If we talk about the Asia-Texas trade route, Mexicans definitely won't give their northern neighbors free passage. Various fees are almost everywhere, so the country will be getting American money while Texas gains new opportunities in international trade. Besides that, Mexico itself will also get a chance to more easily build trade ties with Asian countries, and in particular with China, with which the country has formed very close trading relations. In 2023, Mexico imported raw materials, consumer goods, and cars from China worth $81.5 billion and exported goods worth $18.8 billion. The multilateral modernization of Mazatlan will allow the country to boost these numbers significantly. More exports mean Mexico will have more money, and more imports mean the country will get more of the important goods it needs. Modernization will spark major investments and create thousands of jobs, both during construction and later in the operational phase. Building breakwaters, docks, and terminals will involve contractors, quarries, concrete plants, and transport companies, bringing a wave of employment across the whole supply chain. And once up and running, there will be permanent jobs where local people will work just the same. Besides that, let's not forget about the planned route that'll connect Mazatlan with Canada and pass through Texas. In this case, our current port will become the main hub through which goods move all across North America. For Mexico, the corridor will become a powerful boost for the development of the northern and central states through which the railway line will pass. Along the route, logistics parks, warehouses, processing plants, and new industrial zones will start to grow, and all that means jobs and extra resources for the country's economy. Canada and the U.S. in turn will get extra flexibility for their supply chains. Companies will be able to quickly reroute shipments around crowded ports and tricky routes, which is especially important given today's unstable global logistics. It's worth mentioning that Mexico is actively boosting its port capacities on the Pacific coast overall. For example, there's the port of Manzanillo, which is currently undergoing a major upgrade. The port is well positioned for multimodal logistics. It's relatively easy to get from there to central and northern regions of Mexico, thanks to a solid network of highways and railways linking it to economic hubs like Guadalajara, Mexico City, and Monterrey. This makes Manzanillo a key trading link for Mexico. For example, in 2024, about 4 million TEUs passed through Manzanillo, making up around 40% of the country's total container traffic. Cars, electronics, and industrial parts, all of this successfully arrives through the port to Mexico, while agricultural products, metals, and finished goods are what mainly leave in large volumes. However, quite recently, the decision makers realized with growing trade, Manzanillo doesn't have enough capacity, which led to a massive $3 billion upgrade that can't compare to the port we talked about today. The construction work was combined into one project called Puerto Nuevo Manzanillo Cuyutlán, which officially kicked off at the end of 2024. The work includes deepening the fairway to 59 feet to accommodate larger next-gen container ships, building and upgrading docks, improving the rail and road infrastructure inside and around the port, as well as rolling out digital logistics management systems. A special focus is placed on automating and speeding up cargo operations, contactless entry and exit systems are being introduced, cranes and loading equipment are being upgraded, and terminal warehouses are being improved to optimize storage time. These changes will allow the port to handle cargo faster, lower logistics costs, and maintain its market leadership amid growing competition from other Mexican ports. The modernization is set to continue until 2030. That's when, because of all the changes, Manzanillo will become a port with an annual container handling capacity rising from 4 to 10 million TEU. If everything goes as planned, the port will break into the world's top 15 ports and also climb to number 1 among similar facilities in Latin America. Overall, Mexico's actively pushing to boost its role in international trade.